Driven.
Well, hello everyone, this is a data-driven chat, and today I'm very glad to introduce Abhishek Thakur, who is a chief data scientist at Boost.ai. He's also a Kaggle Grandmaster, a very highly decorated data scientist, and an expert in natural language processing. Hi, Abhishek.
Yeah, thank you very much for inviting me, and it's an honor to be here.
Well, thanks a lot for finding the time. So just to kick off our discussion, I want to ask you, how did you become interested in natural language processing? Can you tell us a little bit about your journey?
Yeah, sure. I mean, this is a long story. I'll try to keep it short. So everything began. So it actually began in England, where I did my internship in University of Warwick. And after that, at that time, I was doing my bachelor's in electronics engineering. And after that, because of that internship and because of good recommendation from the professor there, I got to study computer science masters from University of Bonn. And during that time, I was also working in Fraunhofer. And I was working with OCR algorithms, implementation of OCR algorithms on microcontrollers at that time. And I had a few friends who were working in machine learning or AI. And they were always talking about natural language processing and NLP. And I asked them what the fuss is all about. And they recommend one of the guys, he recommended me to read a paper called Natural Language Processing Almost from Scratch. And yeah, pretty good paper. And it was about building neural architecture, which can be applied to many different kinds of NLP tasks. And with that paper, I got introduced to a lot of different terms, and it was too advanced for me. Because if I'm not aware of what bag of words are, what simple TF-IDF is, and going into neural architecture is going to be pretty difficult. And during the same time, I also started Kaggling, and it was only because of my friends talking about machine learning, neural networks, natural language processing. So I wanted to know what is it all about. And at the same time, there was a competition from StumbleUpon, which was about natural language processing, and they have several websites, and you have to several pages, and you have to detect which articles are going to be evergreen and which are not. So it was a simple binary classification, and that was the first text data that I ever dealt with. I had some help from my friends because of these papers and all. So they sent me some resources to read up. So I read them up, started from very basics. I didn't go and implement neural networks in that competition. I couldn't do that. I didn't know. But I played around with small things like bag of words, TF-IDF, logistic regression. So I learned quite a lot about how to handle, how to clean text data, how to process them, post-processing, pre-processing, all those kind of things. So I think these 2-3 things initiated my interest in natural language processing. After that, when I really got into it was when I started working in a company, and they were dealing with tons of like terabytes of text data. So yeah, that was the biggest exposure to natural language processing for me.
Oh, awesome. So it looks like you had a combination of educational boost and also working on real world problems. So it's really great.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, when I started with natural language processing or even just machine learning, I started on my own. So I started with, I mean, at that time, machine learning was very new. So it was growing. So there were different courses in the university, but the courses didn't teach you how to apply. They taught you the theoretical aspects. But theoretical aspects are okay. It's always nice to have theoretical. You cannot do anything without them. But if you don't know how to apply the algorithms or how to use it in real world, then it becomes a problem. So for that, I used competitions like, for example, from Kaggle to just see, okay, I've learned something, but now I need to apply them. So yeah, that helped quite a lot.
Just to continue discussion on what you have done in your career. So if you had to pick one most important thing that you're most proud of in your career so far, I know it's always the next thing, but if you had to pick something from the past, what would it be?
It's a very difficult question for me to answer because there's not just one thing that I would like to pick. There are many several things.
Let's have several things. We have time.
Yeah, and I hope the best is yet to come. But if I have to pick something, and that's not very technical, it's about perseverance. So I learned perseverance and how to be dedicated, be hardworking, and never give up kind of attitude. Because if I would have given up on the very first problem, I would never have been a data scientist at all. So that's something, if I have to choose something, then I would choose that. And I'm still following that. So even now, when I get some difficult problems to deal with, instead of giving up, I try many different approaches and I try to make them work.
Do you ever ask for advice of other people when that happens? So, for example, I find it quite useful to talk to other people who may be older and wiser. And when I have a difficult problem, I normally try different things, and if nothing works, then I just ask someone else. What would you do? Or do you?
Yeah. I mean, that's the same in. Yeah, sorry. That's also same in machine learning, right? So there is no free lunch. You have to try many different things. And I've seen a lot of beginners who tend to give up quickly, very fast. And I think people, if they don't do that, then they would achieve many good things in future.
So as someone who works in data science, and you work in data science for many years now, can you give some tips to people who want to get into data science? What is the most important thing that one needs to remember when you want to develop a career in data science?
Like from scratch?
Yeah, from scratch. Let's just say we have some people who just think about it, maybe coming from, I don't know, business analytics majors. Or even I had once a student who came from history major and came and said, "Oh, I want to do a summer internship with you." And I said, "Can you program?" And she said, "No." I said, "Okay, well, let's see what we can do here."
Yeah, I mean, that's it's quite difficult, to be honest. I was from electronics engineering background, but I always had this interest for computers, so I learned a lot of things on my own. So even when I was studying electronics engineering, I was working on problems like fingerprint recognition. So it's in some way it's related, but like signal processing, these kind of things, but it's not actually machine learning right now. That problem has been solved, right? So there are many different types of people who want to get in the field of data science. So there are students and professionals who have already worked with some kind of data, like you said, people from business analytics background. So they have worked with some kind of data. And there are professionals who have never even remotely worked in this field. So for students and people who have not worked, I would say, like, if they want to start learning data science, machine learning, they can start with some kind of course, either online or in the university, where they get to know about the theoretical aspects of this field. And one of the online courses I like a lot is machine learning course from Coursera. So that's quite good. So if you don't have any knowledge, but if you have to have some kind of mathematical high school mathematics knowledge, right? So after that, you can try to start with this course. And alongside, as you go to different lessons, or even in the university, after different lectures, whatever you have learned, try to apply them to certain problems, and to see if you are able to solve problems using different theoretical things that you have learned. And most of the time, people get a very good theory, but lack a lot when it comes to applications, as I've mentioned a few times already. So they can start with simple problems, like if they have learned basic logistic regression, let's say, they can start with problems like a Titanic problem, or they have learned linear regression. So they can start with problems like predicting house prices. So now these are very simple problems they can start with, but they should also keep in mind that anybody who is trying to be a data scientist, they have already done these kind of things, or they are doing these things. So they have to go this extra mile, and they have to show some extra effort if they want to like go to the industry, or like go into into research, or to different universities. So I mean that's what I think. Some beginners who give up quite easily, they do it because they cannot define their priorities properly. They cannot sort the priorities out, and they should revisit their priorities. And when people fail, like if you're not able to solve a problem, or like even the Titanic problem, or you're working, let's say you chose a Kaggle competition, which is very difficult, and you have not even reached that theoretical level to approach these kind of problems. You don't have any idea about the approaches, and your basic approaches are not going to win, or not going to give you a very good score or rank, right, in these competitions. So then people tend to give up. So they should not give up. They should rather learn from what other people did, how they approached the problem. If they come across new terms, if they don't have anybody to help them, there's always Google, and they can look for terms, and they can find a lot of videos, a lot of articles. So everything is available online these days. And for people who are like software engineers, who already have some kind of coding background, it becomes a little bit easier for them to jump into data science, because they know coding, so they can start with implementation much easily compared to freshers or students who don't have any kind of coding background with them.
Right. So how actually important is coding, the ability to code? Because I don't know whether that's correct, but I try to get everyone to code, even when people have kind of no background in computer science. I don't know whether that's the correct way of doing it. And then kind of a related question to that is, what language is the best to start from? So I guess, it's the usual kind of chicken and egg thing, like R or Python question. So what would you recommend?
If you ask me R or Python, I will choose Python. But that's because I've always worked in Python. So coding is it's kind of related to the previous question that you asked.
Yeah.
And the thing is, most of the people who want to go into the field of data science or machine learning, they are doing it to get into some good industry.
Right.
And for industry, the most important thing is you have to code. And also for research, right? Even if you're going to research, trying to play with some new neural network architectures, let's say, you have to implement them, right? So it's very important that you should learn to code, and it's difficult to develop the ability and habit of coding. But in the beginning, it's difficult, but later on, it's quite fun. So for me, it's fun now. But at some point, I didn't know coding. When I was doing my electronics engineering, I used to code a little bit in MATLAB.
Right.
But since it was my interest to code, so I learned some basic C on my own, would make some simple programs, and that was it. When I came to my master's, I was still doing C++ and MATLAB. But and even the first competition on Kaggle that I did I did it in MATLAB. Then I learned from others, okay, this is much easier if I do it in Python. And everyone is using Python. Everybody who shared their code, they were using Python. And so Python is my bread and butter. Okay. So it's like I never took a course for Python, and you don't need a course for Python. Is much easier language when you get hold of coding. So for new people who don't have any idea about coding, I would recommend to take some course or read some book. And you need to have this willingness to read documentations and standards to improve on your coding style, or when you're moving to a new coding language.
Mm-hmm.
So I used to write very bad code. But then when I saw the code written by others, when I started using libraries like in Python scikit-learn,
Mm-hmm.
I learned a lot just by looking at their GitHub repository, like how they structure the code, how they manage different things. So and that helped me improve the quality of coding and my coding skills and the standards of my code. So learning by doing is something that I would recommend.
Mm-hmm.
There are many different platforms available that take you from very basic level to much advanced level. So I cannot recommend any of them because I personally have not used any of them. So all the coding that I learned were very like 10 years ago, and Python I learned everything on my own. So it's an easy language when you get hold of it. And I'm also saying Python a lot of times. It's because all the new machine learning and deep learning libraries like TensorFlow, PyTorch, everything is available in Python.
Exactly.
So these are not available in many different languages, and then it becomes easy for productionizing machine learning models, serving it to users, or even for research. So yeah, in short, it's quite important to write good code. And personally, if you ask me, then I won't hire a data scientist who cannot code.
Of course.
Very difficult.
So I want to ask you a kind of a little bit in-depth question about Kaggle competitions. So recently there was this debate between you and some other people on LinkedIn that I saw where someone mentioned that, Kaggle competitions are not very good and they're quite basic. And you had a different opinion. So can you tell us what is the benefit of actually participating in Kaggle competitions? Is that something that you would recommend, or is it something, is there maybe there are other competitions that one should consider? So what are the benefits, what are the drawbacks in your view? Or maybe there are no drawbacks.
I say a lot of things on LinkedIn. I should keep my social profile a little bit low, I think. So Kaggle is not just for beginners, of course. It has a lot of 101 problems like tightening, housing problems, these kind of things, where you can learn how to do exploratory analysis, or a lot of people have already done that. So you can just go and see what people have done, what kind of graphs do you make for analyzing categorical variables, let's say, what kind of standardization, normalization you do on numerical data, what if there's a mix between these two. So these things you will get to learn more by doing than listening to someone, more by implementing. And Kaggle provides you with this platform. So they always have some new competitions, which are like the premium competitions, which are with prize money, and they are difficult because there's there are thousands of people for top 3. So
Kaggle also offers a number of courses, right? So the course, I know that there are like dozens of courses now on Kaggle that you can take. So I guess that's also something that people should consider.
Yeah, there is Kaggle Learn. I haven't used it, but what I've heard from others, it's quite good. So they teach machine learning with coding. So that's quite helpful. But the thing is, so recently not recently, but like a few months ago, I found a NLP problem, text problem. And at that time I had only heard about BERT.
Right.
Right. And in that problem, I got to implement and use BERT.
Mm-hmm.
So this is something that you won't learn anywhere else. And when you say that, okay, I have experience with implementation of BERT, so then you can go more advanced and try to structure your code much better, try to productionize it, and all those sorts of things, and then you get an advantage over others who are applying for the same job, right? If I see someone who has only worked with bag of words, and if I see someone who has worked with bag of words and worked with TF-IDF, worked with neural networks, LSTM, BERT, then I'm going to prefer the other person, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so Kaggle, I mean, it's for beginners. It's not for beginners. There are many good competitors, and sometimes you would also want to give up because of them, because they are so good. And people who win these competitions, there was recently a competition about deep fakes,
Right.
and the prize money was $1 million.
Mm-hmm.
So if you win these kind of competitions, so you have definitely invested a lot of time learning things, and that's more money than you would ever make, probably.
Right.
So yeah, that's like that's amazing, and that gives you a very good experience with different types of problems. So you can learn about images, you can learn about videos, text data, different kinds of things. So I think it's not just for beginners.
Yeah, so it gives you a great challenge, and probably the breadth of different things that you could do.
Yeah, exactly.
And learning opportunity. Yeah. So yeah, thanks so much for this. We obviously cannot avoid talking about COVID-19. So that's a big problem. It changed everybody's life. So specifically, I just want to specifically talk about NLP. Do you see any particular applications where NLP could help in resolving the current crisis? Are there any specific problems that on your end you see where NLP can be particularly useful?
So this is something that it's a very difficult question for me, and this is something that I don't have any kind of experience, and it's probably because of lack of data. But people have been doing some experiments with extracting useful information from different sources using natural language processing techniques there, and also to avoid fake news, fake information. So it can be useful in that sense. But this is definitely a question that is very difficult for me to answer, because I have not played around with a lot of data from related to coronavirus, and yeah.
So one thing I was thinking about potentially looking at policy, and how policy is related to sentiment on social media from different countries, because we observe such a huge breadth of policy implementations related to quarantine. Some countries are on very strict quarantine, others are more relaxed, and all these kinds of things. So to what extent that is correlated in a way with what people are saying on social media, what the sentiment is on social media, might be like one good question. But I guess it is a research question, like you said. It's probably not a question that could help you solve the problem.
Yeah,
It could help you understand what happened.
There is so much going on in this things related to coronavirus that it's very difficult to have an opinion at this time. Yeah.
So what is the future of NLP in your opinion? What will we see in the next 5 years?
And NLP is growing like crazy these days. So with the advancements in technologies, first of all, everything is getting cheaper day by day, related to GPUs and stuff. Not everything. So we are getting a lot of computational power. Some GPUs are getting cheaper. So people are building huge networks. Then there's Google with TPUs, and they're implementing and training much bigger models like BERT, and when there was a time when people used to use only word-based, frequency-based models for natural language processing, and nowadays people directly tend to use deep neural nets because it provides much better results. So in my opinion, and strictly my opinion, I think NLP is moving more towards what we have seen with images in the last few years. So when we got a lot of pre-trained models in images, people would just apply them for different kinds of problem, and that's where NLP is moving towards. I think in one way it is good, but these networks right now, they're quite large, quite huge networks who can give you state-of-the-art results. I hope that will last, and that's going to improve further in the next 5 years. I think one of the things is natural language generation.
Right.
And since I work with conversational AI, I can also relate it a little bit there. So I think these two things are the things that I look most forward to in the next 5 years. So image generation has, with GANs, images, you can generate images which are looking more and more like original images instead of fake images. So probably the same thing will happen to natural language processing and text data.
It sounds exciting. So can you tell us, I don't know how much you can tell us, but can you tell us what are you currently working on? So what makes you excited? What keeps you awake at night?
Okay, a lot of things. A lot of things. So I work at a company called Boost.ai, where we are building conversational AI or chatbots. And there we are always looking for advancements in natural language processing, how to improve our models, natural language understanding. And the most important thing is reduction of false positives in chats. So when the bot cannot answer, it should not answer. You don't want to, so like when somebody is saying, I got shot and I'm bleeding, and if the reply is, do you like to donate blood? So that's a bad thing, right? And chatbots should be able to understand this. So one of the major things that I'm working on is reduction of these false positives. So we also developed an algorithm called automatic semantic understanding, and that takes most of my time. I'm also working on self-learning, where so when you look at chatbots, they are in the industry, they are very much like a classification problem. So you have a message coming in and you have an intent associated with it, and you give a reply based on that. If you go more advanced, you can go to natural language generation, but all this data has to be made somewhere. So what self-learning will do is to just take all the data that you have from human conversations on the phone, or if you're using another chatbot or human chat stuff, and then compile everything and build a bot automatically. So then I think that's going to be pretty useful. That's related to work. And after work, I also have a YouTube channel, and I post tutorials from time to time. So whenever I find something interesting that I would want people, I would want to share with people. So those kind of things. Then I make YouTube videos, and I'm also writing a book called Approaching Almost Any Machine Learning Problem.
Oh wow!
So
okay.
more of a applied.
When is that coming out?
This summer.
Okay, so, awesome! Wow.
Yeah.
Okay,
so that
something
will be
to look forward to.
Yeah, that's very much applied machine learning rather than theoretical, and how you can learn by doing problems, by solving problems. So there's a lot of things that are keeping me awake.
Awesome. So we came to the subject of books. So this is the question that I normally ask at the end of the interview. And a lot of people complain about it because, it's hard to pick one book and one film. But I'm going to ask you two questions. So if I forced you to pick one book and one film, what would your recommendations be?
Can I choose 3?
Okay, on
So
this occasion.
if you ask me about book, then I'm writing a book.
Yeah. Well, we heard about your book,
I'm just
but
kidding, but there are many different books related to machine learning, deep learning. It's very difficult to choose one. There's a deep learning book by Goodfellow. So that's a book I would definitely recommend people to take a look at, but that's very theoretical. And I have to choose one. But there is also one more book by Andreas Müller. He's working with scikit-learn, and it's called Intro to Machine Learning with Python. So that's also a very good book. So I think a combination of these two books would be very nice.
Okay. So how about the film?
Movies? I'm not a big fan of movies.
But it doesn't have to be a data science related movie, just a movie that you like.
Yeah, I mean, I watch comedy movies and these kind of things, so I'm not really a big fan. Recently, I watched Parasite. It was a nice movie.
Okay. So that's a good recommendation.
Yeah, that would be one recommendation. But I think it's better if you watch the AlphaGo movie from DeepMind. So yeah, that's a very nice. It's not a movie, but it's a documentary. Yeah, but I like it quite a lot.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Abhishek. Thank you for finding the time today, and thank you for talking to me.
Thank you very much for inviting me, and it's a pleasure.